There is a moment before the oath is spoken, before the armor seals, before the name you carried for centuries begins to lose its meaning. In that moment, the galaxy is very quiet, not peaceful, not merciful, quiet in the way a void is quiet, because nothing is required to acknowledge you. You stand alone in that silence even if others are present. You feel the weight of something already decided long before you were chosen. Not destiny, not honor, necessity. The Imperium does not ask who you are. It only measures what you can be reduced into. You begin to understand the first truth of the Deathwatch. This is not a brotherhood you join. It is a state you enter, a condition, a narrowing of existence. You were not selected to be elevated. You were selected to be erased in a very specific way. Your past does not matter here. The heraldry you once wore, the battle cries you once shared, the rituals that gave shape to your identity, all of them are already fading. Not violently, not cruelly, simply, efficiently. The galaxy has no patience for excess, and individuality is a form of excess it can no longer afford. The Deathwatch does not save worlds. It delays endings. That is the role you are stepping into, whether you understand it or not. You feel it as the air grows heavier, as if the fortress itself is listening. Stone, steel, and silence press inward, not to intimidate, but to acclimate you. This is where names are shortened into call signs, where faces become tactical variables, where survival is not a triumph but a baseline expectation. Here, duty is not something you carry. It is something that carries you. You have been told this is an honor, that only the most capable are chosen, that this vigil is sacred. And all of that is true, just not in the way you were meant to believe it. Honor in the Deathwatch is not a reward. It is a justification, a way to explain why something must be taken from you without your consent. Because choice you are about to learn is an illusion the Imperium can no longer afford. The enemies you will face do not fight for territory. They do not negotiate. They do not hesitate. They exist as pressures against reality itself, adaptable, patient, and utterly indifferent to your suffering. Against them, conventional war fails. Against them, sentiment is a liability. Against them, you must become something narrower, colder, and far less human. That is why you are here. Not to be remembered, not to be celebrated, but to endure long enough that others never have to know what you did. The Deathwatch does not march in parades. Its victories are classified, buried, or denied outright. When it succeeds, nothing happens. When it fails, entire systems go silent. You will not be sung about. You will not be carved into marble. You will simply be absent. From records, from memory, eventually from yourself. This is the life you are stepping into, a life defined not by brotherhood, but by proximity, not by faith, but by function, not by hope, but by vigilance without end. And as the oath approaches, as the words begin to form in your throat, you sense the final truth pressing down with unbearable clarity. Once spoken, the oath does not bind you to the Deathwatch. It binds the Deathwatch inside you. You are told that you were selected, not rescued, not elevated. Selected. The distinction matters more than anyone admits. The summons does not arrive with ceremony. There is no speech, no gathering of brothers, no moment of shared pride. It comes quietly, delivered through channels that do not invite refusal. Your chapter master does not ask for volunteers. He names you. And in that moment, the future you imagined, command, legacy, a death witnessed by those who know your name, collapses into something far smaller and far colder. You were not chosen because you were exceptional. You were chosen because you were expendable in a very specific way. The Imperium does not waste its best warriors. It repurposes them. You begin to understand that the Deathwatch does not recruit based on honor alone. It selects for compatibility with erasure. Those who can endure silence. Those who can compartmentalize loss. Those whose loyalty is absolute enough to survive being severed from everything that once defined it. Strength is required, but obedience is essential. Identity is a liability. The lie is gentle but persistent. This is a privilege, and perhaps it is, but privileges can still cost you everything. There's no celebration when you depart. Your brothers do not gather to wish you well. They avoid your gaze not out of disdain but instinct. You are already becoming something else. A gap in the formation, a future absent. To acknowledge you now would be to admit that service does not always end in return. You feel it then, the subtle shift in how you are regarded. Not as a hero being honored, but as a resource being allocated. You are not sent to the Deathwatch, because the Imperium believes in you. You are sent because it needs you to disappear into a war that cannot be seen. Against the Xenos, there is no glory. There is only containment. The Deathwatch exists because the Imperium is afraid to look directly at what hunts it in the dark. Entire species are erased without record. Oh, entire wars are fought without banners. You are not there to win hearts or reclaim worlds. You are there to ensure that something never spreads far enough to be named. That is why you are chosen. Not to be saved from obscurity, but to be consumed by it. The process strips away ceremony piece by piece. Your colors will be removed, your insignia cataloged and stored, your deeds archived and sealed. You are not punished for your service. You are sanitized by it. Made operational, made quiet. Honor becomes transactional. You will be respected in theory and erased in practice. And yet, you do not refuse, because refusal would mean admitting that your oaths had limits. That loyalty was conditional. That survival mattered more than service. The Imperium survives on the certainty that someone, somewhere will always say yes, even when yes means annihilation of the self. You feel the weight settle into your bones as the realization takes hold. Being chosen is not recognition, it is preparation, a narrowing of possibility, a life redirected away from remembrance and toward function. The Deathwatch does not ask for your faith, it assumes it. You are not being saved from anything. You are being spent. And as the final confirmations are logged, as your chapter turns its gaze away and the path forward seals shut behind you, the truth becomes unavoidable. From this moment onward, everything you are will be measured not by who you were, but by how completely you can be removed from the story. Separation does not happen all at once. It begins as distance. The familiar cadence of your chapter's rituals fades first. The shared litanies, the rhythms of preparation before battle, the instinctive understanding forged over centuries of fighting alongside the same Jean-Tin, all of it recedes quietly, like a signal losing strength across a widening void. You are still a space marine. You still carry the Emperor Jean seed in your blood. And yet something fundamental has already shifted. You are no longer of them. The Deathwatch does not merely relocate you. It extracts you. You feel it in the smallest details. The absence of familiar voices in the Vox. The lack of shared heraldry on the battlefield. The way no one speaks your chapter's name unless required for record keeping. What once defined you as part of something eternal is now treated as historical context. Useful but no longer relevant. Reality. Your former chapter was a lineage, a living chain of belief, tradition, and sacrifice. Every warrior you fought beside shared not only your purpose but your past. You bled together knowing that if you fell, your name would be carried forward by those who understood what it meant. Here, understanding is replaced by utility. Within the Deathwatch, your history is acknowledged, but never embraced. It is not erased outright, that would be inefficient. Instead, it is compartmentalized. You are valued for what your chapter taught you, tactics, doctrine, instinct. But the emotional bonds attached to those teachings are considered extraneous. You are expected to function without them. This is the fracture that does the most damage because it is subtle. No one tells you that you are alone. They simply stop reinforcing the things that once made you feel otherwise. There are no shared legends, no ancestral grudges spoken aloud, no collective memory beyond mission parameters. Every bond here is conditional, temporary, measured in operational compatibility rather than loyalty. You begin to feel the tension in your own thoughts. Instincts formed under one creed now exist within a structure that does not share it. Reactions once praised are now scrutinized. Beliefs that once defined your honor are now variables to be managed. You are still yourself, but that self is increasingly inconvenient. And so, you adapt. You learn to stop speaking of your past unless asked. You learn to flatten your instincts into something neutral. You learn that belonging is not something you are meant to seek here. It is something you once had and have now outlived. The hardest realization arrives without warning. Your chapter continues without you. They fight, they recruit, they honor their dead. Your absence does not weaken them. It does not slow them. The machine of tradition continues uninterrupted. Whatever you were to them, it was always replaceable. This is not cruelty. It is the Imperium's greatest strength and its greatest betrayal. You are still loyal, still disciplined, still devoted, but that devotion has been redirected, no longer anchored to brothers who know your name, but to a concept, An endless watch against threats that cannot be celebrated, cannot be acknowledged, and cannot be allowed to exist. You feel the quiet grief settle in, not as pain, but as dull pressure, a sense of being unmoored, of having survived something you were not meant to survive intact. In the Deathwatch, you fight beside others, but you do not belong to them. You are many things: weapon, asset, guardian. But you are no longer a brother in the way you once understood the word. And as the distance grows, as the memories soften at the edges, you begin to realize that this severance was never an unfortunate side effect. It was the first requirement. The armor is issued without ceremony. There is no gathering of brothers, no words spoken to mark the transition, no acknowledgement that something fundamental is about to be taken from you. The Tech Marines prepare the warplate in silence, as they always do, because silence is the preferred language of the Deathwatch. When you first see it, the black ceramite absorbs the light around it. Not reflective, not proud, mad and absolute, like a void-given shape, where once your armor carried the colors of your chapter, symbols that told a story older than you, the surface is now deliberately empty. This is not an upgrade. It is a removal. Your chapter heraldry does not vanish entirely. One shoulder pad remains, bearing your original insignia, left deliberately untouched, not as an honor, as a reminder. A fragment preserved like a relic in a shrine, kept separate, isolated, unable to influence the whole. Everything else is Deathwatch black. The armor does not just cover you, it corrects you. Its systems are calibrated for interoperability, not individuality. Loadouts are standardized for kill team integration. Markings are minimal, functional, stripped of personal significance. Even battle honors are subdued, recorded in data slates rather than etched proudly into plate. You become visually interchangeable. On the battlefield, this matters more than you expect. Enemies no longer see a son of a specific chapter. Allies no longer read your colors and immediately understand your doctrine. You are identified by function, not legacy. And slowly, that external perception begins to work inward. Rituals change. The prayers spoken while donning the armor are different, shorter, colder, focused on annihilation rather than glory. The armor's machine spirit is not bound to your chapter's traditions. It answers to a broader, more impersonal command structure. It does not care who you were, only what you can do. You notice how the black plate hides damage. Scars that would once be worn with pride now disappear into the surface, unmarked and uncelebrated. Victory leaves no visible trace, neither does survival. There is a reason for this. The Deathwatch does not want you to remember yourself through symbols. Symbols invite attachment. Attachment invites hesitation. And hesitation, when facing the alien, is unforgivable. The armor teaches you this lesson every time you move. It is heavier than what you wore before, not in mass, but in intent. It carries expectation, finality. When you wear it, you are not meant to be seen as a hero. You are meant to be mistaken for inevitability. Many veterans admit, quietly, that this is the moment the transformation truly begins. Not when they were selected, not when they left their chapter, but when they stop seeing themselves reflected in their own warplate. You can still remember what your armor used to look like. The colors, the iconography, the way it reminded you of where you came from. But memory fades. Black does not reflect. Black absorbs. And over time it absorbs more than light. It absorbs identity. There is no declaration when the war truly starts. No moment of escalation. No clear transition from preparation to conflict. One day you are training, recalibrating weapons, memorizing xenobiological kill patterns. The next you are deployed, and then again, and again, and again. The Deathwatch does not fight wars, it endures them. Assignments arrive without fanfare. Encrypted orders. Coordinates, objectives measured in extinction metrics rather than territory gained. A nest eliminated, a fleet delayed, a species crippled before it can be named. You are rarely told what catastrophe your actions have prevented. That knowledge is unnecessary. What matters is that the alien does not advance. The enemies blur together over time. Tyranid bioforms. Eldari constructs Necron automata, things without names and horrors that defy taxonomy. Each threat is different in form, yet identical in intent. All must be erased. All are treated with the same cold finality. There is no rotation. Other Space Marines fight campaigns, defined arcs with beginnings and ends, victories to commemorate, losses to mourn. In the Deathwatch, there is only continuity, a seamless chain of operations stretching backward into secrecy and forward into oblivion. The watch never ends. It only changes location. You begin to feel it in the spaces between battles. There is no time allotted for reflection, because reflection invites doubt. Instead, there is study, analysis, weapon maintenance, mission debrief stripped of emotion. Even rest feels provisional, something borrowed, never owned. Vigilance becomes instinct. Every shadow is a potential threat. Every transmission is suspect. Every silence carries. You are trained to anticipate ambush not as a possibility, but as a certainty delayed. This constant readiness does something to the mind. It narrows it. Complex thoughts give way to prioritization. Moral considerations are simplified into threat assessments. Nuance becomes inefficient. The galaxy is reduced to hostile variables and acceptable losses. You stop asking why a mission matters. You learn to ask only how fast it must be completed. The Deathwatch encourages this erosion, not through indoctrination, but through exhaustion. When war is endless, resistance to it becomes pointless. You do not burn out, you flatten. Emotions dull, not from trauma, but from overuse. Fear loses its edge. Hatred becomes procedural. Even pride fades because pride requires witnesses, and there are none here who will remember. You realize slowly that the greatest enemy the Deathwatch faces is not the alien. It is time. Time without milestones. Time without legacy. Time that grinds purpose into repetition. Each mission is vital, each sacrifice necessary, and yet taken together, they form something indistinct, an endless blur of violence performed in the dark. The Imperium will never know how close it came to extinction. It will never know how many times you held the line alone. That ignorance is by design. Vigilance loses meaning when it is eternal. It becomes a state of being. You are no longer waiting for war. You are living inside it. And as the years pass, unmarked, uncelebrated, you begin to understand the true cost of the long vigil, not in what it takes from the galaxy, but in what it takes from you. A kill team is not a brotherhood. It wears the shape of one's shared armor colors, coordinated movement, synchronized fire. But beneath that surface lies fracture. Each warrior comes from a different chapter, a different lineage, a different philosophy of war. You stand shoulder to shoulder with beings who were once taught to see the galaxy through entirely different lenses. And none of that disappears when the black armor closes around you. You carry your chapter with you like a ghost limb. Its doctrines linger in instinct. Its rituals echo in memory. Its heroes still whisper in the back of your mind when decisions must be made under fire. Across from you fights another Marine who learned a different truth, swore different oaths, bled for different ideals. The Deathwatch tells you this diversity is strength. It rarely mentions the cost. Tactics clash before words ever do. One warrior advances aggressively, another favors containment. One seeks annihilation, another pursues. These differences are subtle, but in combat, subtlety kills. Every hesitation becomes a fault line. Every disagreement must be crushed instantly, because discussion is a luxury the alien will not grant. So you learn restraint, not trust restraint. You do not question orders aloud. You do not challenge methods unless failure is imminent. You suppress instinct when it conflicts with cohesion. Over time, this suppression becomes habit. You stop expressing preference. You stop offering perspective. Silence becomes safer than correction. Unity is enforced, not grown. The irony settles in slowly. You fight as part of a team, yet you are more isolated than ever before. Among your original brothers, disagreement strengthens bonds. Here it risks fracture, and fracture risks death. So every Marine becomes an island, connected by necessity, separated by doctrine. Rivalries form without words. A glance held a fraction too long, a correction delivered without warmth. A moment where one Marine saves another and is resented for it. Pride does not vanish in the Deathwatch. It calcifies. It turns inward. It becomes something sharp and private. You learn each other's capabilities intimately, but never truly know one another. Names are used less over time. Rank and function replace identity. You become the breacher, the marksman, the tactician. Roles are safer than personalities. Roles do not argue. Roles do not remember who you were before. 4. Even camaraderie, when it appears, feels restrained, as though everyone understands it must not grow roots. Attachments complicate sacrifice, and sacrifice is inevitable, so bonds remain shallow by design. You may fight beside the same kill team for years. You may save each other's lives dozens of times. And still, when one of you falls, there is no shared mourning, only reassignment. The gap is filled. The formation holds. The Deathwatch survives through interchangeability. This is the quiet cruelty of the system. It demands unity while ensuring no one ever truly belongs. You are never alone on the battlefield, yet you have never felt solitude more completely. Because here, surrounded by warriors just like you are many, and you are alone. The Deathwatch teaches you to hate the alien. Not emotionally, emotion clouds judgment. Not blindly, ignorance invites extinction. You are trained to study Xenos, to dissect their biology, their psychology, their patterns of thought. You learn how they move, how they adapt, how they break. You memorize the angles at which their bodies fail, the frequencies at which their minds unravel, the thresholds beyond which they stop being threats and become corpses. Hatred in the Deathwatch is methodical. And slowly, unsettlingly, you begin to notice something. The alien is not just an enemy. It is a mirror. Every Xeno species the Deathwatch hunts represents a fear humanity refuses to name. The Tyrannid embodies consumption without purpose, existence reduced to hunger. The Eldari show what happens when mastery curdles into arrogance, when survival demands cruelty disguised as necessity. You are told these beings must be exterminated because they threaten humanity's future. What you are not told is that they resemble humanity's possible endings. This knowledge seeps into you quietly. During briefings, during post-action analysis, during the long hours spent reviewing alien behavior patterns that feel uncomfortably familiar. You hear justifications that sound too close to your own. The Deathwatch insists this recognition must never become empathy. Empathy weakens resolve. So you suppress it. You learn to frame every Xeno's action as inherently hostile. Every adaptation is deceit. Every attempt at survival is provocation. Not because this is always true, but because hesitation born of understanding is lethal. And yet, understanding is unavoidable. You cannot fight what you do not comprehend. So you exist in contradiction, required to know the alien deeply, while forbidden from acknowledging the resemblance. The more you learn, the more disturbing the parallels become. You begin to see that extermination is not just defense, it is preemptive denial. If they live, they remind humanity of what it could become. And that reminder cannot be allowed. Paranoia becomes a survival instinct. You stop asking whether a species is hostile. You ask only how long before it will be. You stop questioning intent and focus solely on capability. Potential alone becomes justification for annihilation. The galaxy has taught humanity this lesson repeatedly. Today's curiosity is tomorrow's extinction event. So the Deathwatch acts early. Absolutely. Without apology. You burn worlds not because they have attacked, but because they might. You erase cultures not because they are cruel, but because they are resilient. Every victory is framed as prevention. Every atrocity is foresight, and slowly the line erodes between protection and preemption, between survival and domination, between humanity and the things it destroys. You begin to realize the deepest truth the Deathwatch will never speak aloud. The alien is feared not because it is different, but because it proves that survival does not require being human. And that is the one idea the Imperium cannot afford to live. The Deathwatch does not wage war. It performs extermination. There is no room for escalation, no concept of proportional response. When a kill team deploys, the decision has already been made. The target is not to be repelled, contained, or negotiated with. It is to be erased so completely that history itself struggles to remember it ever existed. This is not brutality born of rage. It is precision born of fear. Every weapon the Deathwatch carries is designed with a singular philosophy. Mercy is inefficient. Bolt rounds are modified not merely to kill, but to annihilate tissue beyond recovery. Specialized ammunition adapts mid-battle, responding to alien biology faster than instinct. Blades are sanctified not for honor, but to ensure nothing survives long enough to evolve. You are taught that suffering is irrelevant. What matters is finality. Against the alien, hesitation is the deadliest sin. The Deathwatch therefore strips combat of anything that might slow the moment of execution. No warnings, no declarations, no room for the enemy to learn from survival. Every engagement is engineered to deny adaptation. This is why the Deathwatch studies relentlessly and strikes without pause. You learn that many xenospecies grow stronger through conflict. They adapt, they absorb, they learn. So the Deathwatch ensures there is no second encounter. Every battlefield is transformed into a sealed equation. Input violence, output silence. There is something deeply unsettling about how calm this feels. You do not feel hatred when you pull the trigger. You do not feel triumph when the last alien dies. You feel confirmation. The weapon discharges. Discharges. The target ceases. The mission continues. The Deathwatch trains you to think in outcomes, not actions. Civilian casualties are not collateral damage. They are statistical inevitabilities. Ecological collapse is not tragedy. It is containment. Entire biospheres are sterilized because leaving even fragments behind invites resurgence. The alien is not permitted remnants, not spores, not data, not memory. Even knowledge is weaponized selectively. Some kill teams deploy with arms so classified that even fellow space marines are forbidden to know they exist. Others carry relics recovered from extinct species, tools repurposed to ensure no one follows their evolutionary path. The irony is not lost on you, but irony is a luxury the Deathwatch does not allow. Every tool you wield carries an implicit confession. Humanity does not trust itself to win fairly. Fair fights create survivors. Survivors create adaptation. Adaptation creates extinction. So the Deathwatch fights unfairly, absolutely and without restraint. And somewhere along the way, you realize something has shifted inside you. You no longer ask whether a tactic is cruel. You ask whether it is sufficient. You no longer see enemies. You see problems awaiting deletion. The weapon is no longer something you carry. It is something you are becoming. The Deathwatch does not merely fight the alien. It studies it. And that knowledge is dangerous. Every kill team is exposed to truths the wider Imperium is never meant to know. Not propaganda, not sanitized threat briefings, but raw, unfiltered intelligence, records of civilizations older than Terra, technologies that rewrite physical law, ideologies that do not merely oppose humanity, but render it irrelevant. You are told this knowledge is necessary. You are not told what it will cost. Xeno's intelligence is not just data. It is perspective. It shows you how alien minds function, how they adapt, how they perceive time, causality, and survival. Some species do not fear death. Others do not experience individuality. Some consider humanity a temporary geological event rather than a rival civilization. Once you understand this, something fractures. The Deathwatch trains you to compartmentalize. You learn to lock certain thoughts behind mental vaults, to treat forbidden understanding like a live weapon. Handled only when necessary, then sealed away. But the mind does not forget what it has seen. Awareness leaves residue. You begin to notice patterns others cannot. You recognize Xeno's influence where administratum records see coincidence. You sense evolutionary manipulation where commanders see rebellion. You detect long games unfolding across centuries, while the Imperium reacts in decades. This awareness isolates you further. Other space marines fight enemies, you fight inevitability. Some knowledge is so corrosive, it is restricted even within the Deathwatch. Black vaults exist beneath watch fortresses, archives sealed not to protect secrets, but to protect minds. Records of extinct species whose last acts nearly erased sectors. Schematics of weapons that won wars but destabilized reality itself. Doctrines that worked once and were never used again because the cost was unacceptable. You are permitted access only when survival demands it. And each time, something inside you erodes. You begin to understand why the Imperium fears innovation, why progress is heresy, why curiosity is monitored like treason. Knowledge accelerates outcomes. It collapses moral ambiguity into brutal clarity. Once you know how something truly works, you cannot pretend otherwise. The Deathwatch carries this burden so others do not have to. You become the containment vessel for understanding too sharp to be widely held. This is the quiet truth. The greatest threat is not the alien weapon, but the alien idea. And by learning to destroy it, you risk becoming its echo. Thought patterns shift. Tactical reasoning grows colder. Compassion becomes a liability. You still serve humanity, but you no longer see it as pure. You see it as fragile, reactive, and perpetually behind. And you realize the cruelest irony of all. The more knowledge you acquire to save mankind, the further you drift from being human. Every watch fortress is built for war, but that is not its primary function. Its true purpose is contained. From orbit, these structures appear as bastions, citadels of adamantium and void-shielded stone, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. They are positioned at strategic crossroads of the galaxy, where Xeno's activity is most likely to metastasize. To the Imperium, they are symbols of vigilance. To those who live within them, they are prisons. Inside a watch fortress, time behaves differently. There are no seasons, no cycles of civilian life, no markers of peace. The corridors echo with measured footsteps and distant machine hymns. Light is rationed. Silence is enforced. Even conversation feels monitored, as if the walls themselves are listening. You are never alone. Monastic routines govern every hour: training, meditation, combat simulation, briefing, decontamination. Repeat. There is no indulgence, no personal ritual, no space for nostalgia. The fortress strips away distraction until only function remains. This is intentional. Isolation sharpens obedience. Routine dulls resistance. The Watch Fortress is designed to erode individuality without appearing cruel. There are no overt punishments for emotional attachment, only subtle discouragements. Mementos are permitted but discouraged. Personal heraldry is allowed but subdued. Names are used less often than call signs. Over time, you stop reaching for the past. The fortress also houses what cannot be allowed to roam freely: captured xeno specimens, sealed relics, cognitive hazards classified beyond inquisitorial clearance. Entire wings are restricted, their existence unacknowledged by those without authorization. You learn not to ask what lies behind certain doors. Curiosity is not forbidden, it is redirected. Even the architecture enforces submission. Ceilings loom impossibly high, dwarfing the individual. Walls bear no decoration beyond symbols of duty and sacrifice. There are no windows in places meant for reflection. When you look outward, it is always through armored glass, always toward threat vectors and kill zones. The message is constant and unspoken. You exist to watch, not to live. You begin to understand that the fortress is not merely a base of operations. It is a psychological filter. Those who cannot endure its quiet pressure are identified early, reassigned, broken, removed. The fortress does not adapt to you. You adapt to it. And in adapting, something fundamental changes. You stop thinking of freedom as absence of control. You begin to see it as deviation from duty. The world beyond the fortress feels distant, unreal, almost indulgent. This is how the Deathwatch ensures loyalty without chains, not through fear, but through environment. The Deathwatch does not destroy you quickly. It wears you down. There is no single moment where you feel yourself breaking, no dramatic collapse of identity. Instead, the erosion is gradual, almost imperceptible, measured in small compromises, quiet adjustments, and thoughts you no longer bother to challenge. At first, you remember who you were, your chapter, your heraldry, the doctrines you once recited with pride. You tell yourself this service is temporary, that you will return changed but intact. That belief sustains you longer than you realize. Then the missions blur together. The enemy changes, but the outcome does not. Deployment, contact, eradication, extraction. You begin to recall operations by efficiency metrics rather than experience. Casualties are numbers. Worlds become coordinates. Entire species reduced to threat profiles. Emotion becomes inefficient. The Deathwatch does not forbid feeling. It simply makes it inconvenient. There is no time to process loss, no ceremony for the dead beyond a name entered into sealed archives. Grief is acknowledged only insofar as it does not interfere with readiness, so you learn to compress it. You tell yourself you will unpack it later. Later never comes. Your speech patterns change. You use fewer personal pronouns. We becomes unit. I becomes asset. Even in private thought, identity dissolves into role. You begin to evaluate yourself the way command does, by usefulness, reliability, survivability. Sleep becomes shallow. Dreams fragment. When they come, they are not of home, but of unfinished engagements and tactical anomalies. The enemy follows you into rest, not as fear, but as unresolved data. This is when the distance becomes noticeable. You observe other space marines and feel something like dissonance. Their certainty seems loud, their faith uncomplicated, their belief in glory feels naive. You do not envy them. You do not resent them. You simply no longer belong to them. The Deathwatch becomes your baseline for reality. Constant threat, constant readiness, constant suppression of doubt. Anything else feels irresponsible. And yet, there are moments, rare and dangerous, when you remember what it felt like to care without calculation. When a fragment of the old self surfaces, uninvited, these moments are not comforting. They are destabilizing, because they remind you that something has been lost and that it will not be recovered through endurance alone. The cruelest truth reveals itself slowly. The Deathwatch does not need to kill your individuality. It only needs to make it irrelevant. And by the time you recognize this, the erosion has already done its work. There are legends carved into the Imperium's memory, names spoken with reverence, deeds etched into stone, banners raised, hymns sung, victories preserved as symbols of hope and divine purpose. Most Space Marines find knowing that if they fall, their chapter will remember. Their sacrifice will be shaped into story. The Deathwatch is denied this comfort. There are no monuments bearing their names, no public honors, no triumphs recited to inspire future generations. What they do must remain unspoken, because the truth of it would terrify the very Imperium they protect. You learn this early. After an operation succeeds, there is no celebration, no cathartic relief. The aftermath is administrative, reports sealed, footage classified, intelligence compartmentalized and buried. The wider Imperium is told nothing beyond the threat has been neutralized. You are not thanked, not because your work lacks value, but because acknowledgement would require understanding. And understanding would invite questions no one is prepared to answer. Other Space Marines speak of honor in battle, of the Emperor's gaze upon them, of glory earned through visible sacrifice. You fight alongside such warriors at times, watching them charge with banners raised, voices lifted in defiance. You do not join them, not because you lack courage, but because you know better. You have seen what lies beyond sanctioned truth. You have exterminated species whose existence was erased not for mercy, but for sanity. You have destroyed relics that could have rewritten Imperial doctrine or shattered it entirely. There is no room for pride in such acts, only necessity. Even your victories feel hollow. When a world is saved, it never knows how close it came to annihilation. When a sector survives, it never learns what was removed to ensure its survival. The Imperium continues on, ignorant by design, while you carry the weight of what cannot be spoken. Silence becomes your reward, and silence over time becomes expectation. You stop imagining recognition, stop hoping for understanding. You begin to accept that anonymity is not a flaw of the Deathwatch, it is its defining feature. To be known would mean failure. To be remembered would mean something escaped containment. So you endure without witness. Even within the Adeptus Astartes, your service exists in the margins. Brothers know you serve, but not how. Questions are discouraged. Details are withheld. Some respect you for it. Others distrust you. Both reactions miss the point. You did not serve for respect. You served because someone had to stand where no light reaches. And in that realization lies the quiet bitterness of the Deathwatch. Not that their sacrifices are forgotten, but that forgetting is the very proof they succeeded. Silence is not absence. It is the price of survival. Trust is a luxury of those who share certainty. Within the Deathwatch, certainty does not exist. Every kill team is a convergence of chapters, doctrines, and histories that were never meant to coexist. You fight beside warriors whose beliefs contradict your own, whose rituals you do not recognize, whose genetic legacies carry secrets you were never meant to know. Unity is enforced, but trust is not encouraged. You learn this quickly. Information is rationed. Briefings are segmented. Objectives are revealed only when necessary, often moments before execution. Not because your brothers are unworthy, but because knowledge itself is dangerous. Every truth is a potential weakness, every certainty a possible avenue of corruption. Compartmentalization becomes instinct. You stop sharing personal histories. You stop asking questions about others. Even casual curiosity is trained out of you. The Deathwatch does not require emotional cohesion. It requires operational precision. Anything beyond that is excess, and excess gets people killed. Suspicion is not an anomaly here. It is a survival mechanism. Every Space Marine knows that corruption rarely announces itself. It whispers. It compromises. It wears familiar face. You have seen veterans fall not through treachery, but through exposure to forbidden lore, to alien cognition, to truths that erode the boundaries of loyalty over time. So you watch. You monitor tone, hesitation, silence. You learn to read micro-delays in responses, minute deviations in combat rhythm, patterns that suggest internal conflict. Not to accuse, but to prepare. Because hesitation costs lives and mercy can doom worlds. Even yourself you do not fully trust. The Deathwatch trains you to question your own impulses. Pride is suspect. Anger is scrutinized. Sympathy is flagged as risk. You are conditioned to interrogate every emotional response before acting on it to ensure it serves the mission rather than undermines. Over time, this self-surveillance becomes constant. You do not relax. You do not confide. You do not assume loyalty is immutable, not in others, not in yourself. The galaxy is too old, the warp too patient, and the consequences too vast to allow complacency. This creates a peculiar tension. You fight in perfect coordination, yet remain emotionally distant. You trust your brothers with your life, but not with your mind. You rely on their bolter fire, their timing, their discipline, while keeping their inner world sealed off from your own. Unity without intimacy, survival without fellowship. In other chapters, brotherhood is reinforced through shared ritual and shared truth. In the Deathwatch, brotherhood is transactional, measured in reliability, not belief. You are allies by necessity, not by identity. And that necessity never ends. Even the watch commanders maintain distance. Authority is absolute, yet personal connection is minimized. Orders are clear, justification is limited, and dissent is treated not as rebellion, but as inefficiency. Trust in this environment is redefined. It is not faith in character. It is confidence in function. As long as a brother performs his role without deviation, trust exists. The moment deviation appears, contingency plans activate. Not out of malice, but doctrine. The Deathwatch cannot afford hesitation born of sentiment. You understand this, and still, it weighs on you because somewhere beneath the armor, beneath the conditioning, beneath the vigilance, there remains a memory of what brotherhood once meant, of shared laughter, shared rights, shared belief in something beyond survival. In the Deathwatch, those memories are liabilities. They slow reaction time. They soften judgment. They invite doubt, so you bury them. And in doing so, you become exactly what the watch requires. A weapon that functions flawlessly surrounded by coether weapons, all pointed outward, never inward, never toward each other, never toward the truth that might fracture the fragile equilibrium holding you together. Trust is not broken here. It is deliberately dismantled, because in the Deathwatch, survival depends not on faith, but on distance. You are never alone in the Deathwatch. Even when no Inquisitor stands before you, even when no rosette is visible, even when the Watch Fortress seems sealed from outside authority. They are always present. The Deathwatch exists at the pleasure of the Ordo Xenos, and that truth shapes everything. Doctrine, deployment, secrecy, even survival. You do not merely fight the alien. You fight under observation, within a structure designed to ensure that no power, however necessary, ever goes unwatched. The Inquisition does not trust strength without oversight, and the Deathwatch is among the greatest concentrations of sanctioned violence in the Imperium. You feel the shadow early. Briefings arrive with sealed addendums marked inquisitorial priority. Missions are justified not with context, but with necessity. Questions are permitted only insofar as they improve execution. Curiosity beyond that is quietly noted, not punished, not corrected. Remembered, Inquisitors do not command the Deathwatch directly, but their influence is absolute. They decide what knowledge is shared, which threats are elevated, which victories are acknowledged, which failures are erased. Entire campaigns vanish into sealed archives, their outcomes known only to a handful of minds deemed resilient enough to endure the truth. You understand what this means. Your loyalty is assumed, but never accepted as permanent. Every kill team is a test. Every return to the Watch Fortress is an evaluation. Every surviving veteran is a variable that must be monitored, not because you are suspected of treachery, but because exposure changes people. The Ordo Xenos knows this better than anyone. They have watched warriors break under truths they were never meant to carry. They have authorized executions not for crimes committed, but for risks calculated. And if necessary, they will authorize yours. This knowledge alters obedience. Orders are followed with precision, but never with illusion. You know that survival does not guarantee absolution. Success does not guarantee trust. The more effective you become, the more dangerous you are considered. Power attracts scrutiny. Knowledge invites containment. The Watch Commanders walk a narrow path. They are warriors, but also wardens, balancing the needs of the Deathwatch against the unspoken authority of the Inquisition. They protect their brothers where they can, deflecting inquiries, compartmentalizing exposure, ensuring that those who serve too long are rotated or quietly reassigned. Not everyone is saved. Some are deemed compromised. Some are judged unstable. Some are simply no longer worth the risk. You learn not to ask what happens to them, The inquisitorial presence is rarely overt. That is its greatest strength. You do not see chains, but you feel their outline in doctrine, in silence, in the careful absence of certain conversations. The Deathwatch is trusted with extinction-level authority, but only so long as it remembers who is allowed to judge its use. Even faith is measured here. Excessive zeal draws attention. Excessive doubt draws suspicion. Balance is survival. You are permitted to hate the alien. You are permitted to destroy it utterly. You are not permitted to decide what the Imperium should know. That decision belongs elsewhere. And so the Deathwatch exists in a state of conditional autonomy. Lethal, elite, indispensable, yet never sovereign. You are a blade kept sharp, but always sheathed when not required. Always counted, always catalogued. You serve humanity, but you are not trusted with its future. And perhaps that is the final irony of the Deathwatch. Even as you stand against horrors beyond comprehension, even as you sacrifice identity, brotherhood, and self in the name of survival, you do so beneath the watchful gaze of those who understand one immutable truth. No weapon should ever be allowed to forget it is a weapon. There is no single moment when it happens. No ceremony, no declaration, no clear boundary you can point to and say, this is where I stop being myself. The transformation is gradual, measured not in years, but in decisions. At first, you still think like a warrior. You weigh actions against instinct, doctrine against conscience. You remember your chapter's teachings, its rituals, its heroes. You still believe there is a distinction between who you are and what you do. The Deathwatch erodes that distinction quietly. Missions demand adaptability beyond doctrine. You are required to think like the enemy, anticipate alien logic, exploit behaviors that feel fundamentally wrong to comprehend. You learn how Xenos strategize, how they deceive, how they endure. Over time, these patterns settle into your thoughts, not as curiosities, but as tools. And tools do not question their purpose. Your body changes first in function, then in meaning. Specialized wargear becomes second nature. Ammunition types are selected without hesitation. Kill patterns are internalized until execution feels reflexive. You no longer ask should, only how efficiently. Emotion becomes noise. Compassion slows reaction time. Hesitation creates casualties. Doubt invites extinction. You do not suppress these impulses violently. You outgrow them. They become irrelevant, artifacts of a self that no longer fits the role you inhabit. The Deathwatch does not strip away your humanity. It teaches you that humanity is inefficient. Every engagement reinforces the lesson. Extermination is cleaner than containment. Finality is safer than mercy. The galaxy does not reward restraint, it punishes it. You witness worlds saved because someone chose annihilation early rather than regret later. And you learn to be that someone. Your identity compresses. Chapter traditions fade into background memory, replaced by watch protocols. Heraldry loses meaning. Personal symbols become unnecessary. Even your name is spoken less frequently, replaced by designation, role, function. You are not diminished, you are refined. A living system optimized for one purpose, to end threats before they become narratives. The Inquisition values this transformation. The Watch commanders depend on it. The Imperium survives because of it. And so the process continues, unchallenged, uncelebrated, irreversible. Eventually you realize something unsettling. You no longer imagine life beyond the Deathwatch. The idea of returning to your chapter feels abstract, distant, almost fictional. You wonder how you would explain what you've learned, what you've become, to brothers who still believe in honor untouched by necessity. You cannot articulate it without violating oaths or destabilizing belief. So you stop imagining return. The weapon does not dream of rest. It exists to be used. And in that realization lies both purpose and loss. You are effective beyond measure. You are trusted with extinction-level authority. You stand where few ever will, and fewer still survive. But the cost is final. You are no longer a space marine who serves the Deathwatch. You are the Deathwatch, given form, armored in black, stripped of excess, carrying the accumulated violence and forbidden knowledge of 1,000 silent wars. You are not meant to be understood. 2 quadrillion, 222 trillion, 222 billion, 222,000, 222,000, 222. You are meant to function. And as long as the galaxy remains hostile, as long as alien threats evolve and return, as long as humanity survives through preemptive destruction, you will endure, Not as a man, not as a brother, but as a solution. When it finally happens, when the summons comes, when your vigil is deemed complete, it does not feel like victory. It feels like displacement. You are released from the Deathwatch with the same efficiency that claimed you. No celebration, no absolution. A final exchange of oaths, a removal of black armor that feels less like undressing and more like shedding a second skin. The silver pauldron is taken from you, not as punishment, but as closure. You tell yourself this is return. It does not feel like one. The journey back to your chapter is long enough for memory to intrude. You recall faces, rituals, shared campaigns, yet they surface like fragments from another life. Familiar, but emotionally distant. You prepare words you might say, explanations you might give. You will not use them. When you arrive, the fortress monastery stands unchanged. Banners still hang where you remember them. The rhythms of training, prayer, and preparation continue as if no time has passed. But time has passed, and it has passed through you. Your brothers greet you with reverence, some with pride, some with unease they do not fully understand. They see the marks on your armor, the scars too precise to be random, the way you observe angles, exits, and shadows without thinking. You move differently now. You listen more than you speak. You assess rather than react. Your silence unsettles those who remember you as someone else. You are no longer shaped by shared legend. You are shaped by outcomes. When tactics are discussed, you notice the omissions. When strategy is planned, you see risks unspoken. Your instincts lean toward finality where others still hope for containment or honor-bound engagement. You do not argue. You already know how these debates end. There are things you cannot say. Knowledge sealed by oath presses against thought like a locked door. You cannot warn them fully. You cannot explain why certain victories are illusions, why some enemies must never be allowed to retreat, why mercy has consequences measured in centuries. So you remain quiet, and silence creates distance. Your chapter welcomes you back, but it does not reclaim you. You are assigned duties, command roles, mentorship positions, but something fundamental has shifted. You are no longer entirely of them, and they sense it. You feel it most in ritual. The words are the same. The meanings are not. Faith feels performative. Brotherhood feels conditional. Glory feels irrelevant. Where once you saw purpose in tradition, you now see structure useful, stabilizing, but incomplete. The Deathwatch taught you what waits beyond doctrine, and you cannot unlearn it. In quiet moments, you catch yourself listening for threats that will never come here. You replay engagements no one else remembers. You dream in fragments of alien worlds your brothers will never know existed. You survived the watch, but you did not leave it behind. You are a reminder of something your chapter prefers not to dwell on, that there are wars fought without banners, victories recorded nowhere, and sacrifices that cannot be honored without destabilizing belief. You stand among your brothers, armored in familiar colors once more. Yet you are a visitor, a witness, a man who has seen what must be done when hope is not enough. And even as you take up the symbols of home again, you understand the quiet truth. You did not come back unchanged. You came back incompatible. You were told that service ends, that there is a point where duty loosens its grip, where vigilance gives way to rest, where the weight of watching finally lifts. This is the lie that allows the Deathwatch to exist at all, not spoken aloud, but implied through silence, because the truth is simpler. It never ends. Even those who return to their chapters do not truly leave. The Deathwatch follows them like an afterimage burned into the soul. Every shadow is evaluated. Every unknown is treated as threat. Every victory feels provisional, temporary, incomplete. You no longer believe in conclusions. You have seen too much. You know that containment is a pause, not a solution. That extermination is never total, that the galaxy does not heal. It only forgets long enough for the wound to open again. Where others speak of peace, you hear preparation. Where others see stability, you see pressure building. Trust becomes dangerous. Emotion becomes inefficient. Hope becomes something you monitor rather than feel. The Imperium does not thank you for this clarity. It does not even acknowledge it. You are not punished for knowing too much. You are simply isolated by it. Information is locked away, buried beneath classification and ritual, not to protect you, but to protect everyone else from becoming like you. Because if too many understood the true scale of what presses against humanity, faith would fracture. And the Imperium survives on faith far more than truth. Some never leave the watch at all. They remain, not because they are ordered to, but because reintegration becomes impossible. Their identities erode until only function remains, kill team after kill team, fortress after fortress, a life measured not in years, but in threats neutralized and catastrophes delayed. They become permanent sentinels, neither fully as starts of a chapter, nor something new, just watchers. Yeah. The galaxy does not reward this. It does not pause. It does not acknowledge effort. Entire civilizations rise and fall without ever knowing how close they came to extinction, or whose hands quietly ensured their survival. History records outcomes, not the cost required to achieve them. And the cost is always paid by someone unseen. You, the Deathwatch, exists so others can remain ignorant, so belief can remain intact, so the Imperium can pretend that survival is righteous, heroic, ordained, rather than brutally conditional. This is the final truth you carry. Endurance is not noble. It is necessary. There is no glory waiting at the end of the vigil, no absolution, no final rest, only continuation, only the understanding that as long as humanity exists in this galaxy, someone must stand where knowledge becomes poisonous and victory means silence. The Deathwatch is not a brotherhood. It is a scar tissue formed around existential terror, and scars do not fade. They remain long after the wound is forgotten, so the watch continues, unseen, unthanked, unending. Not because it is just, but because the galaxy does not care what is just, only what survives.